welcome to lesson 2 for science and ecology. This particular lesson is not in your textbook, so the only place you're going to get this information is from this video and from what we talk about in class. And what you're going to notice throughout the ecology unit is that they talk about Aboriginal knowledge or Indigenous peoples' knowledge. And why is this important? It's important because Indigenous peoples possess detailed and invaluable knowledge that allows them to live in a sustainable way with their local environments. And that's something that we as Western Canadians and as westernized civilized people are having a really hard time doing. And so more and more our scientists are going to these groups of people to find out how they have managed to do this for so long. So as we go through this, some of the things to think about are how Indigenous knowledge and science complement each other, how Indigenous knowledge relates to food, medicine, and navigation, and how Indigenous peoples use modern technology today. So the first thing we want to look at is who are Indigenous peoples. So as I've already mentioned, they've lived here or lived in a certain area for a very, very long time. And they've preserved their distinctive local traditions. Many of these people live in a way that's very close to the traditions that they've always had and have changed very little over the past hundreds or even thousands of years. Others live in a way that is a mix of their traditional ways and how we live today with our modern practices. And our Indigenous peoples across the world make up over 5,000 different tribes and 250 million people across the world. Our Canadian First Nations people, a very large group, there's 6 main groups with 630 recognized tribes and almost 1 million people that can claim Aboriginal status. And in Canada, to claim Aboriginal status, you have to have at least 1/4 Aboriginal blood. In BC, there's 198 recognized tribes, which make up almost 1/3 of the tribes in Canada as a whole. So we have most of the Aboriginal tribes live right here in BC. In addition, the BC tribes account for 7 of our 11 Indigenous languages in Canada. So we have quite a diverse community right here in BC. The First Nations of BC refer to those people that can trace their ancestry to the Aboriginal people that inhabited the land that is now British Columbia prior to the arrival of the Europeans and Americans in the late 18th century. These people have been here on this land working with our ecosystems for thousands of years, okay? These groups are commonly referred to by other names, including Aboriginals, Natives, Indians, Indigenous peoples, and Indian bands. The term First Nations is more commonly used now to remove the misnomer of Indians, which arose from the misconception by Christopher Columbus that he had landed in India, when in fact he did not. The term First Nations also avoids the often derogatory connotation associated with the terms Native, Indigenous, and Aboriginal. A derogatory meaning that sometimes it's not used in the nicest sense of the word. So we use First Nations to describe our people. So why is Indigenous knowledge important? Indigenous peoples have accumulated an enormously valuable and complex knowledge of their local environments that we've already mentioned. Originally, when the settlers came over from Europe and from the Americas, these people were thought to be primitive, so they were not taken seriously, and often a lot of their information that was learned at that time was never written down. The information within the bands and the First Nation peoples themselves is often told through stories and art, dance and music, and they're passed down through generations through hands-on experience and those storytelling. The elders know the important information and pass it along to their younger people. In BC and all over the world, more and more scientists are asking to work with and learn from these Aboriginal peoples and communities, and it's important to respect and value their ways. Our Aboriginal peoples know how to live in harmony with our environment. Again, they've been doing it for years. It wasn't until westernized civilization came to Canada and the Americas that we started to ruin things. The Aboriginal people and the First Nations people have been doing a fantastic job prior to that. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit more about this in class and actually look at some Aboriginal storytelling. And this will cross over with some of the stuff that you're going to be doing in SNL as well.